Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane, and I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts. And I'm really excited to be here with Erica Cirino, who is one of my favorite speakers. I think this is her third time with us. She's a climate activist and new mom who is going to be sharing her experience with both being a climate activist and a new mom and how best to serve the planet while you're serving your family. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Before we get started, just want to say a couple of things. I'd like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. And I'd like to thank Erica for once again allowing us to share this program with other libraries because when libraries get together, we kind of make magic. So there's that, and then I wanted to say that you can buy signed books by Erica from Aesop's Fable, a favorite local indie bookstore. I know that from you, they still have a few book plates of yours left, Erica. So I will put a link to that in the chat as well as an email to everybody after the program. So as I said, Erica is a climate activist. She wrote Thicker Than Water, The Quest for Solutions to the Plastic Crisis. And she's done some really adventurous things around the climate and plastics in the oceans and things like that, which I think she'll talk about, which are fascinating. But more recently, her latest adventure, of course, is having a baby. And that might have changed. I don't know if it changed your perspective, but it certainly added to it. And so that is what we're talking about tonight. If you have questions for Erica, please put them in the Q&A. I will moderate them after her presentation. In the meantime, enjoy the conversation. Erica, welcome back. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Mina, for that wonderful intro, and I'm so glad to be back. Just letting folks know I'm recovering from a sinus infection, so apologies for the slightly nasally voice, but excited to be here nonetheless. As Mina said, I am here to discuss healthy plastic-free pregnancy and parenting. I gave birth to my child last year, and so I've been in this journey for, you know, quite a while now, but still kind of new to it. So I'm learning more and more every day, and I'm really excited to, continue expanding my knowledge of just the plastic issue, but also solutions in this space in particular, because this is not something that was part of my life previously for my first child. So as Mina said, I am a communicator, I'm a writer, author, and artist, and I focus on climate and plastic pollution in particular. The plastic issue is truly an issue that affects every single person on this planet and every single part of this planet, as I'll explain a bit later. And I've also done a lot of research in these areas, and now I am doing my work as a parent, so that is really exciting. Um, so to reiterate, for folks who don't know me so well, I've spent the last decade telling the story of the climate crisis and plastic pollution from the middle of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch across the Atlantic Ocean, Southeast Asia, across Europe and the United States to West Africa and beyond. I've really dedicated myself to understanding these issues inside and out so that we can help implement solutions that we need. And unfortunately, right now, there is so much scary news about plastic out there. And this was part of the reason why I wanted to write a book about this issue, because as a journalist, telling this story for almost a decade, I was just inundated by, you know, bad news all the time. And I wanted to understand really what is the whole scope of this issue. And unfortunately, plastic pollution is much more insidious and widespread than we really truly understand. And we're finding that out in real time, which was a really startling thing to be a journalist learning about this issue. And so now, news about plastic is, front page, and most everyone knows about it. So you can, I just want to pose the question, how many of you have heard about microplastics? You can answer with a hand or say it in your mind, the answer. But I was one of the writers who in the past decade really helped bring this issue to light. And it's a key part of my book, Thicker Than Water. So in the dozens of stories I've written, photographed and illustrated over the years, I've also co-authored several scientific papers about this microscopic pollution of gigantic proportions. So this is just one aspect of plastic pollution that you've probably heard about, hopefully, by now. And if not, now you're hearing about it. So I've met with experts and people on the front lines over the world to document and communicate the extent of this problem, and the whole entire plastic problem, which I'll touch upon in a bit. And very importantly, as I said, its solutions. And so, in short, the main problem with plastics is that they never break down. They only break up into smaller and smaller pieces that remain plastic forever. And these particles are now found in our air, water, soil, food, plants, and animals, and including in our human bodies. So, in the human body alone, plastics have been found in our bloodstreams, brains, breast milk, feces, hearts, livers, lungs, penises, placentas, semen, stomach, testes, uteruses, and veins. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. And so, unfortunately, that list is growing longer and longer. Seemingly almost every month, there's like at least one new study about microplastic has been found here. And really, this has been in the last few years because when I first started working on this issue in 2016, there was looking specifically at microplastic, that is. This story about microplastic has grown exponentially. So it went from, oh, there are these little pieces of plastic in the middle of the ocean to they're right here, right now in our bodies, and really everywhere we look. And that's because in the last 100 years, plastic has become the most ubiquitous man-made material on Earth. And just to put an exclamation point on this, one scientist whom I've worked with very closely, Dr. Sam Mason, um, I've interviewed her and visited her lab previously in Fredonia, New York. She has called these microplastic particles little poison pills. And that is really what they are because plastics contain any mix of 16,000 chemicals, at least 4,200 of which are already known to be toxic to people and the environment. And so these particles spread plastic poisons far and wide, and we'll discuss the risks in depth in a bit. But first, I need to point out that plastic pollutes in many ways. It's not just the microplastic, it's not just the plastic items, which those are huge sources of pollution. But that the moment that plastics fossil fuel ingredients are extracted from the earth through the shipping and refining of these fossil fuels into petrochemicals, and then to plastic production, shipping, use, and disposal in landfills, incinerators, and the environment, and our bodies, as we know. These are all polluting processes, and they include, like I said, plastic and microplastics, these plastic particles, but also greenhouse gases, which contribute to the climate crisis, other chemical emissions into the air, water, and soils. The production of plastics poses a lot of risks on the front line specifically, and often these are in underserved communities that are either low income, rural, or in people of color communities. And so plastic pollution is not just an environmental problem. It's not just, garbage patch kind of stuff. It's also a climate, environmental justice, and wildlife problem. And most importantly, for all of us, it's a serious human health crisis. And it really is plastic. Plastic is Earth's biggest oil spill. So this is a multimedia piece I made using microplastic from the garbage patch, to make a fetus inside of a pregnant person. So the rest is watercolor, but you can see it is a startling image. And I think that it's really important to point out that plastic is especially bad for babies, infants, children, and pregnant people, because the delicate hormonal systems of these life stages and populations are still in development. So think of your hormones like the conductors leading the orchestra of your body. So when these chemical messengers are interfered with other chemicals that maybe mimic or act like them in different ways, this can cause serious problems that harm the ways that our bodies work, everything from our metabolisms to sparking cancer in our bodies, and much, much more. So again, all of plastics pollution causes harm. And as I pointed out, like the chemical emissions of fossil fuel and plastic, industries, they are linked to adverse pregnancy outcomes as well and serious health problems in young people like asthma and cancer. And so some of the severe health problems linked to hormone disrupting chemicals In these populations also include neurodevelopmental problems, metabolism disorders like obesity, thyroid disease, reproductive and fertility issues, and growth and development issues as well. We know that PFAS, which are a common plastic additive, which is listed in those chemicals of concern that I have up on the screen right now, um, these are also in the news a lot lately. You've likely heard of them, specifically in water systems. So, because there's plastic all around us, and because the industrial processes that are used to create plastic and other consumer goods pollute our environment, these are getting into our drinking water specifically. And we're seeing a lot of that lately. Where I'm from is Long Island, New York, and there's a lot of contamination there because we have old landfills that are leaching. All the plastic in the landfills is leaching chemicals that are going into the water system. So, you know, these types of chemicals, which like PFAS, for example, are a class of chemicals that are useful in some ways. Like they lend nonstick qualities to cooking pans and food packaging, and they can also put waterproofing on synthetic rain jackets. Um, they're strongly linked to infertility in females. Yet this chemical is, like I said, like it's so useful, and so it's all around us. It's in our water, it's in our products that we use every day, and unfortunately, it has this horrible, effect on our bodies. Um, Pregnant people with detectable levels of phthalates, which are a common plastic additive, like extremely common, found in everything from vinyl flooring to plastic food packaging. Their bodies are more likely to experience preterm birth of babies as well as other birth complications. And when we're in the womb, plastic chemicals can also impair babies' development, specifically of their brain and vital organs, which can lead to poor prenatal growth and future health problems. Um, Babies, children, and youth exposed to plastics, many forms of pollution, can also experience early puberty. And as I mentioned, metabolic problems like obesity. And the list goes on and on. It's not a pleasant thing to hear about and learn about, but these are the real health effects that are being determined right now. And I think previously we had some knowledge about this. We had knowledge specifically about the chemicals used, and I think the widespread use before they were really fully understood has really set us back. So the chemical development, like, oh, these chemicals are very useful. Let's put them in plastic. However, there's huge cost to that for our health. Earth is really telling us to slow down in a lot of ways, and I'm learning, I learn this more and more every day, but specifically looking at the plastic problem and the climate crisis, which are interlinked, of course, like I said, um, the greenhouse gas emissions linked to plastics are really, really huge. And of course, plastic is basically an oil spill, as I said. So um, we are in a time of a major fertility crisis that experts have linked to the profusion of plastics, industrial development, and toxic chemicals. And we know that our environment, food, and water are increasingly contaminated with plastic particles and the hormone disrupting chemicals that they carry as plastic production continues to increase and worsen all over our planet. Babies specifically are exposed to plastic particles and chemicals from teething toys, synthetic clothing, and textiles, which are really all around us. Like check the labels of your clothing. We'll get into that actually later, but I will tease that that is a very major source of plastic pollution in our lives. Um, there are so many plastic baby products like bottles and diapers, and as well as household dust, because so much of our built environment is actually made of plastic. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, even breast milk is polluted with plastic and plastic chemicals, and microplastics and hormone disrupting plastic additive chemicals have been detected in the urine of breastfed infants. So it's like, even if you go the natural route, there is exposure for babies. Babies' fecal matter actually contains more microplastics than adults, which is interesting. And scientists, kind of think maybe that's all the plastic stuff that's typically used in rearing a child, in conjunction with them being often on the ground where there's a lot of that plastic dust, unfortunately. Um, and then infants who are fed formula prepared in plastic bottles also ingest even more plastic at the rate of millions of particles per day, which is huge. So while it's not always possible to choose where you live in relation to industry, um, today I'm going to focus specifically on the dangers of plastic because this is something you can more easily choose to eliminate from your life, plastic being plastic as the material. It's really hard to completely avoid plastic. I totally empathize with that, but I learned that there are so many common sense changes that you can implement in your life to greatly reduce your exposure, and improve your health and the health of your child and family. So instead of being paralyzed by all of this information, which I've been gathering over the years, I have definitely put my knowledge to positive change in the ways that I can. So this includes changing my lifestyle. I've, tried to eliminate plastic from my day-to-day life as much as possible. I've built a house that is mostly plastic free, which is not easy to do. Um, that's not perfect, tell you that, but I got pretty far with that. And my latest adventure of parenthood, which similarly imperfect, but definitely came a long way. And I think sharing this knowledge will definitely help others continue to, keep the momentum going and we can share what we learn. In particular, I'll say that I've been inspired by living very simply at sea, excuse me, where simplicity is the basis of everyday life. And I think that's often the answer to a lot of our problems is to make things a little more simple instead of more convenient, seemingly convenient. And we get to reduce a lot of plastic. So living without the luxuries on land really was a great lesson to learn what we need to be grateful for and take care of. And I learned to myself that that to me means the earth and my human body, which really are one and the same. Because if our health is affected by the planet's health, and the planet is not doing great, our health will also suffer. And that is just a simple fact of life. Simplicity is definitely not a new idea in the world, but it is the ongoing challenge of our humanity. And I'll share with you some insights from my journey that are practical, money saving, and also healthy. And it's true that some of these habits require a shift in the way that you do things, but how can we really ever expect to grow if we do not change? So let's dive in. I'm going to talk about pregnancy first. And really, these tips are tips for anyone who wants to eliminate plastic from their lives. Like I made a lot of these changes pre-pregnancy too. So I think they are very positive in all different ways. And I do feel that I, have maintained a good quality of health. And a lot of that probably is attributed to these changes I've made. Um, so clothing, I mentioned that earlier. So a lot of the clothing in our lives today is synthetic. That means man-made, and technically all clothing is made by someone somewhere. And there are many concerns with dye, also fair business or trade practices and workers' rights. There's a lot of labor issues in the textile business, a lot of exposure to chemicals during the sizing, which is like a washing process, and also the dyeing of clothing. So there's a lot there. And let's take it one step at a time because, we're focusing on plastic now, but definitely encourage you to look at the broader issues with all of these things because nothing is a perfect trade-off. We'll put it that way. It's not going to solve every issue we have, but it will reduce your exposure to plastics. We can always improve upon that. So I like to give that caveat because we have to be realistic here. So when I did my experimenting, which was out on the ocean, I saw a lot of microplastic, but specifically a lot of fibers. So plastic fibers from clothing are everywhere. They shed off our clothing often when we wash it. Hundreds of thousands to millions of plastic fibers can come out in the wash, depending on how much synthetic clothing you own, and run through your laundry on a daily or regular basis. And so, a surprising amount of the plastic particles all around us are actually from our clothes. And so, we're seeing that even in the indoor air, like if you have textiles or clothing made out of synthetic fibers, in your house, the indoor air will often be polluted by these particles as well. And you can really reduce your exposure by eliminating these fibers from your wardrobe. I've shown kind of a list here. So I also like to say that it's better to buy secondhand anything because you're preventing like a new thing from being made um, in that case. So we'll look at clothing and say, okay, if you have organic bamboo, cotton, wool, wool especially. I know that there are a lot of animal-based natural fibers, and again, if you can get those secondhand, it's better. You're just, reducing the amount of strain on people, planet, and animals as well. So I have that in the top. If you can get 100% natural fibers, there's hemp, there's jute, there's bamboo, as I mentioned. And so then we look at compromise materials. So that's like mostly natural and partly synthetic. Again, I'm using the word synthetic to talk about plastic in this case. So we'll say spandex is a plastic material, and that's often used, like, say, in undergarments or stretch pants. So it gives it that stretch quality that you're seeking. Excuse me. That's a compromise. I would say if you can't find like 100% something, then go with mostly natural. That's like better than nothing, right? And then avoid things that are mostly or 100% made of plastic. These listed under there, these are all plastic-based fibers. So nylon, polyamide, which is like acrylic, lycra, polyester, and elastane, um, and of course spandex we have there too. So these are things to avoid for sure. Um, and next, you can look at your food and what you eat. So researchers have found at least 240,000 plastic particles in the average liter of bottled water. And mostly these are actually nanoplastics, which are even smaller than microplastics, and they harm our health. So these particles are so small they can cross the blood-brain barrier, and because we're finding plastic particles in human brains now, there have been studies suggesting that potentially Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease are linked to these plastic particles in our brains, which is very, very concerning. Most bottled water is really just repackaged tap water without additional treatment. So, you're not getting that natural spring water that you're promised on the packaging necessarily. And it has only added plastic and plastic chemicals. So the toxic chemicals manufactured into plastic water bottles also leach into the water itself. So what's more, these plastic bottles are known to contain BPA and antimony, microplastics, and many, many more chemicals. And they will get into your bodies, especially if these bottles are reused, kept in warm environments, or are made of recycled plastic. So it's really, I gave that reason. Please don't drink bottled water. Um, if you do drink it, you're consuming at least twice as many plastic particles as people who drink only tap water, and probably a lot more. So a water filter, and I recommend reverse osmosis or a life straw glass pitcher can help reduce your exposure to plastic particles and chemicals um, in the drinking water space. And so when we talk about food now, very important also talk about, packaging of food. So avoid as much as you can processed and plastic wrapped food, which is more likely to contain these plastic particles and chemicals than unwrapped food, like fresh fruits and vegetables. Um, Specifically, if you can avoid, um, like highly processed, ultra processed foods, we've actually seen a huge surge in recalls on foods because they contain plastic, like particles from manufacturing, which is also very concerning. Um, and so many foods are now also wrapped in polyvinyl chloride or PVC, which is particularly toxic. It has a lot of, again, like it can have non-stick qualities, for example, um, and seems to like preserve foods in a certain way. So that's why it's widely used, but you can also very effectively store foods in glass, beeswax wrap, stainless steel, wood, or ceramic at your home. And the same goes for your foodware, drinking bottles, and utensils. I like to repurpose like glass jam or peanut butter jars. for drinking and food storage. They're just really widely available now, where I shop for my food. And, you know, if I'm not gonna make it myself at home, I'll go, buy peanut butter, buy jam, and do something with the jar because you can recycle it, of course, and it's good to recycle glass when you can. But yeah, if I can use it for some other purpose, I'll do that, and it's free technically. Um, and so you can shop at zero waste stores is another great way to reduce your exposure to plastic. You'll see a lot of these bulk bins, which are in that like kind of central lower part of this page. Um, they themselves may or may not be made of plastic. I've seen glass ones once or twice, but those are a little precarious. So what you really are doing there is reducing the amount of packaging because those stores will buy things in bulk and have these bins where you can actually just take a scoop or two and put it in your own containers, whether they're glass or some other material. And so those are really great. Again, it's not perfect, but it's reducing a lot of the plastic there and hopefully reducing your exposure as well. Um, I love the databases, and I have this listed later in the presentation, but it's called Litter Less, Eco Rate, or Plastic Free Futures Reuse Map. And these are websites where you can find zero waste stores near you. I, in particular, love, I'll give a shout out to Reboot Eco in Connecticut, where I love to buy my zero waste items and bulk items. And so bring your own containers and bags when you shop in bulk. Um, Check out farmers markets in the spring and summer months. And even when you just go to the grocery store, shop for naked foods. So these are just foods without wrappers. And if you do need to buy something that's packaged, look for foods that are in non-plastic packaging, like flour sold in paper bags, and bring your own bags for shopping. I like to point out that aluminum cans are also actually lined in plastic. So there's, that's anti-corrosive measure, but that will make you have exposure to plastic particles and chemicals. So if you can avoid that, that's great. And again, this is a work in progress. You don't have to make every single change today, but if you get these habits going, you can definitely get there. And they are pretty easy to maintain once you get to that point. And take a look at your home. So, what I did when I built my home, which was hard because it was during the pandemic when everything was not available and everything was very expensive, but there were sacrifices made. So that's why it's not a plastic-free house, but it's a low plastic house. So if you can look for wood, stone, stainless steel, cast iron, tile, copper, aluminum, um, furniture without foams and plastic coverings, these materials are just some of the many things you can look for that are not made of plastic. You can make your own covers or cushions if you have existing chairs that may not be natural, out of natural materials, to just at least put a barrier between you and what you have. If you can opt for jute or hemp rugs. I have wood floors, but I have a few rugs because my dog needs something, some traction. She's not sliding all over the place. And I actually have four jute rugs, and I really love them. They've held up so far for about 4 years. Um, they're very simple, they look nice, and they don't have plastic in them. It's great. Um, you can cover your healthy mattress. So there's different healthy mattresses that have either no plastic. So I've seen mattresses with, wool filler and they're made of cotton on the outside and they're often very expensive. But there are like those middle compromise mattresses that maybe have less toxic plastics. So I mentioned like PVC is a very toxic plastic. Polyurethane foam is also specifically found in a lot of mattresses, and that can be not the best material to use, again, for that exposure. But we have to make sacrifices because if your budget is a certain thing and, the top mattress is another thing, we have to make compromises somewhere in between. So if you can get a mattress that is either covered in some kind of natural material, often cotton, like cover, that's better than, just being right up against the phone. But if you can get like a nice mattress, like I would say the brand Naturepedic makes some pretty healthy, um, decent mattresses. If you can afford it, great. That is what I have bought for my child, which I'll get into a bit later in the parenting section, splurge. But that toddler mattress is a lot smaller than the adult mattress. So again, all these compromises and things to consider, but definitely move in that direction of that positive change. Um, Cotton sheets and covers and duvets are really widely available. You can get, real down pillows. That's what I've done. At your local Target, for example, like they exist and they're not $1 million. So that's the positive, is that a lot of these materials are kind of becoming more widely available as awareness of plastic pollution and its dangers spread. There are materials like modal and tencel, which are better than plastic, but they are still super processed plant-based fibers. That's why I try not to mention them too much. But again, those trade-offs, make them as you need to. And lastly, when it comes to pregnancy, I want to talk about things that I've done to reduce my exposure, like in terms of hygiene, personal care, and cleaning around the house. So there's so many different things now that you can find that are plastic free, and I love it. So I look out specifically for greenwashing because there's a lot of claims that like, oh, this healthy thing. But again, think simple. Like the less is more. So if you can find truly natural and sustainable materials and items like cellulose and coconut sponges, and scouring pads, totally natural laundry soap. I love Meliora. They're a really good brand and it's effective and also just like very non-toxic. Um, Use natural laundry soap and also natural bar soap and bar shampoos. If you can find like these cotton scrubber bags for your soap, instead of like a synthetic scrubber, that's so much better for you and your body. Avoid um, body washes with any kind of, abrasive because often there could be microplastics. There have been regulations passed, but I've still seen some on the market that do contain plastic, which is not good. Um, I recommend bamboo toothbrushes and you can use tooth powder or tablets. You'll see in the upper part of this page. Those are toothpaste tablets. And silk floss for your teeth is a very nice thing, and you're not rubbing plastic in between your pearly whites. So I use that and it works very well. Um, as I said before, a lot of the dust in our homes can contain microplastics. So vacuum and dust your home often, especially if you can keep the windows open or run an air filter. Um, I run an air filter regularly to just clean the air in my house of dust and potential plastics, because as I said, it's not perfectly plastic free here. And when you're doing that, please remember to take your child off the floor because they are exposed. Okay, now parenting. When it comes to the parenting aspect of being plastic free, you'll find so much stuff. Like I didn't realize when you become a parent that just like a lot of stuff it comes into your life. And as someone who's quite simple and minimal otherwise, I was kind of amazed. However, like I said, I'm keeping things in compromisable states. So I want to be like realistic, but also be strict about my let's be simple, let's be healthy. So you'll see a mix of things here that you know, you can be inspired by and take it as far or as, slow as you want. But when it comes to care, when it comes to the care of your child, I want to talk about the car seat and the stroller. So these are not plastic free. Like they just, you're not going to find like a metal car seat. Like that just not does not exist. Um, so when you can, look for these inevitably plastic products. Um, Although I have seen some metal strollers, which is pretty cool. But anyway, I digress. Try to find those that are at least covered with natural materials. So I did find a car seat that did have a cover that was made out of cotton, and they did not contain flame retardants. So these are these toxic chemicals that we're finding out, like, you know, a fire is going to actually ignite faster on plastic, and if you had natural materials, it would probably not go up in flames that quickly. And the safety of these flame retardant chemicals is really outweighing the benefit of applying them to some of these products. Um, and then when it comes to, as I said, the mattress in the crib, this is a nice like toxin-free mattress from Naturepedic. I've covered it with cotton sheets. The crib got for $40 on Craigslist. It is a an oak crib, like vintage oak crib that someone was getting rid of. The mobile is made out of 100% wool and wood, and so is the little holder thingy, little arm. And when my child was first born, we put them in a Moses basket, which was handmade from reeds and leather. And so that is completely plastic free, which is pretty cool. Um, so now the clothing aspect. I opted for cloth diapers because conventional diapers are made of plastic. And so it's a plastic exterior, and then it also has this plastic kind of gel or bead material that absorbs moisture, which of course is very helpful, as we know. But a lot of these chemicals are really bad actually for child's future fertility, because they're on these sensitive areas of the body. And then also when the diapers are disposed of, these chemicals are going, excuse me, right into our environment, where we are inevitably exposed again. So I've opted for unbleached cotton diapers. I've had to compromise because in a perfect world, I would use a wool cover, but those can be very leaky and they are difficult to clean. So the exterior is a PFAS-free, which is a nonstick chemical plastic exterior. But again, the baby's body is not touching the plastic for the most part. So that was a trade-off thing that I've made. But I have a cotton wrap that I walk with my child in. Um, and again, there's that stroller that I've used that is free of toxic chemicals and flame retardants. Now when it comes to clothing, we have lots of clothes for a baby. They grow so quickly. But just like with our clothing, you can choose natural materials, and they are much more widely available now. You just have to look for them. And I think again, buying secondhand if you would like to is a great idea. We had a lot of people gift us some pretty cool stuff, for all the way from, swaddles to towels, hats made out of wool. Like there are really nice quality stuff out there. Um, and then when it comes to play and learning, so this is an area where, I've learned a lot about the toxic nature of children's toys, in my current role, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I work for an organization called Plastic Pollution Coalition now, um, running their communications. And in terms of like what children play with, like I was just shocked learning through some of our partner organizations, because we are a coalition, um, and different reports that have been done, that children's childhood has really been plastified. So, PVC, again, this really toxic plastic, is very widely found, specifically in like dolls, like little plastic dolls, and some of the more well-known figures in our doll world, including Barbie and G.I. Joe. And so these toys are often put in children's mouths, and especially with like infants, we know that a lot of plastic is used for teething, a stage which my child is going through right now. And I don't want plastic particles, going in their body, and I think that most parents don't want that. So I've been searching and searching for ways to avoid plastic in all of these realms, and sometimes it's really hard. So I'll say that, but it is possible. When it comes to these teething toys, I found that, untreated, like unglued wood, like there are certain types of wood that you can purchase. Coffee wood is one of them for children to teeth on. It will not splinter or break apart or injure the child, and just making sure those items are large enough not to go in your child's mouth fully, so they could always be pulled away. And then silicone is a food grade plastic. So wherever necessary, it's better than like conventional plastics. Um, Real rubber is also another option. Like there are rubber pacifiers that are, not synthetic or plastic rubber. Um, and then looking for organic cotton and wool stuffed animals and toys that are at the very least, because a lot of these toys are made to make sounds like crinkle and that's plastic inside, or have a bell inside. So if you can, at least make sure the exterior is cotton or another natural material. You can look for made safe standards, which are voluntary safety standards, which are really great. They are one of Plastic Pollution Coalition's partners. And then you can also look for ASTM standards, which are a little more vague, and the Green Guard standard, which it doesn't guarantee the product is healthy and safe, but it is an indicator that the company has done something to reduce any kind of toxic exposure in their product. So when you think about other, toys to incorporate, my partner made this toy bar out of wood and metal and rope. So like that was pretty much a quick project, but hey, instead of a plastic toy bar, there you go. Costs $25 to make it. Um, Books are another great toy that are typically made of paper. Um, and as I said, like just looking for materials that are not, synthetic. So I also want to point out the mat for this playpen that you see here is made out of real rubber as well. And so just to recap things as we wrap up here, eliminating plastic from your home and your life with your family. You can start with pregnancy, as I did, and look at like kind of your day-to-day habits, your food and your diet, as well as how your home is furnished, and also your, personal care is also another important area to pay attention to because there's often plastic there that maybe you have not even noticed. Like, how many times have you given thought to like, my toothbrush is plastic and like that's the first thing I put in my mouth every morning, or like flossing your teeth with like a string that's made of plastic. Like it's become so normalized that it's really good to question what you're doing every day. At least I found it that way because the more I looked, the more I was finding that needed to be swapped out. Um, that's why I've gone into depth here about some of the major changes you can make. Um, and then when it comes to parenting, looking at how you care for your child as well as clothing, um, and how they learn and play is some crucial, these are some crucial areas for examining plastic and its typical uses, and then how you can replace those uses with other materials that are much safer and healthier. And I want to reiterate, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. Together, we are learning every day, and getting further and further. So it's not about being the most fancy plastic-free person. It's about being realistic and doing what you can. And excuse me with my scratchy throat. Um, as Mina said, you can read more in Thicker Than Water. I really wanted to underscore solutions because we need to do something. Obviously, these are individual changes and we need systems change to change our world. So we can learn more about there. And then, as mentioned, I work for Plastic Pollution Coalition as communications manager, and we have amazing resources on making change in your individual life, in your community, and in the wider systems that we need to shift, as well as resources such as the Healthy Pregnancy Guide and the Healthy Baby Guide, which have a lot of similar tips to what I've shared with you today, which concurrently I found out that my organization had created these as I made these changes in my life. So it was very cool to share notes and compare notes. Um, and also we have links to these zero waste shops above that I've listed. So you can find out what's near you. And I want to just also reiterate again, you know, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, or does it just escape out of my screen? Hold on. Um, the new Zoom is confusing the heck out of me. Here we go. Okay. Um, so if you have any questions like that come up later after this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me, and my contact info is on Plastic Pollution Coalition's website. So let's get into the Q&A, but just if you want to let things marinate for a while, and if you have more questions later, feel free.
Thank you, Erica. It's really scary for our next generation, but also sounds like we're moving. We have some options now. It felt like, like 5, 7 years ago, it felt like we didn't have any options, but it definitely feels like it's changing a bit. We just have to take advantage of that. Okay, so I want to remind people to put questions in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. Um, Somebody wanted to know on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious is the plastic issue at this time, in your opinion, Erica?
Oh, it's an 11, I would say, at least. It's so serious, and yet we can't be paralyzed by it. So, like, I am not someone who likes to be alarmist in that sense of like running in circles with the house burning down, right? But we need to be serious and like know the facts. I like nuance when I answer questions, but it's also so important to be like, we need to act swiftly because scientists, the majority of scientists are telling us that like this is an emergency. So once they say that, you have to, the majority has spoken really, and the people on the front lines of this problem too. And I was not a scientist per se. I mean, I have a Master of Science degree, but I never worked in a laboratory really before I became a journalist. And then I started really engaging with communities that were doing science. And I feel like any of us can really intimately know our world and ourselves if we apply ourselves to that research. Um, so yeah, what I've learned personally too is really is an emergency, put it that way.
I would agree with that. And I have done none of the research. It just feels that way. Um, Jules asks, how can we dispose of plastic in our homes properly? Because I think you had said, or I've read that only 9% of plastics actually gets recycled. And part of that is because they're not clean plastics.
Great question. Yeah, the recycling rates are dismal, and unfortunately, specifically for plastics, say it that way, all materials could be recycled more, and the systems and infrastructure for recycling them, well, specifically glass and metal, um, are better than plastic. But again, nuance here is important. So let's try to improve those. But the best thing to do is really to eliminate the need for recycling by using reuse and refill, repair and share and regenerate. These are these principles that can be applied to just reduce waste generally.
Mhm.
But where necessary, we need to recycle. And also the perennial question, like, what do we do with all the plastic that exists today? Like, people are like, well, I've saved like all my yogurt containers for 10 years and I like don't know what to do with them because if we recycle them, they're never going to be recycled. And oh, it's so tiring. It's hard. It's hard these days. So, I mean, there are more recyclable plastics and less recyclable plastics. We've written about this. I was writing about this on the Plastic Pollution Coalition website. But we have an article that says what really happens to our plastic recycling, and I'll share the link in the chat. And there are certain plastics that are more likely to be recycled. Um, and these are typically hard plastics. So numbers one, oh, sorry, where is the chat? Here we go. Give this to you right here. I don't think I can screenshot the image, but it's in this blog. Um, but number one, number two, are more recyclable than the others. This is PET and HDPE, and then polystyrene is like the least recyclable. So foam like rarely is recycled. And polypropylene can sometimes be. So these are some of note to mention. But again, more likely all of these plastics are going to be sent to a landfill or an incinerator. Um, and that's really not solving the problem. So again, like let's try and prevent the upstream before we have to focus on this downstream effect.
Mhm.
Um, it's really hard. Like some people I've spoken to said like, should we even put plastic in like a nuclear waste repository, like a bunker underground, because it's that we know it's that toxic. It's releasing greenhouse gases. Like, what do we actually do with it? So we need to solve these problems too, as we shut down the plastic tap by switching to other materials that can be endlessly reused and repurposed.
Jules asked again, what about clothes? Giving them away just seems to pass on the problem.
100%. Like if you have synthetic clothing, I really don't like like dealing with it. That's why like I've phased it out of my wardrobe like over years. Like it took me a long time. You can definitely purge and it's hard. I like to think of it this way too, like I didn't want to donate my synthetic clothing, but there might be people in so much need that even a synthetic jacket will be a lifesaver for them, for a short time. And hopefully one day they won't need that jacket and they'll get, a healthier jacket too. But, um, people donated, um, I saw like a big donation of synthetic clothes and I look at it and I'm like, you know, people do need things so badly that like sometimes we have to overlook that it's synthetic. At least it's not brand new. I wouldn't buy someone something like if I could buy someone something to donate, it would be plastic free. But if we do have something and we can't use it, someone will probably need to use it.
Mhm. Another one of my favorite speakers, Sarah Robertson Barnes, um, also a climate activist, plastics and things. And she has said several times to me, it's only single-use plastic if you only use it once. So that really changed the way I looked at things because there is so much plastic. Like we have plastic sandwich bags that we've had forever. We've switched over to the beeswax ones, but we have them sitting in the house. So we do use them and we use them over and over and over again until they fall apart. So it feels a little bit better than to buy it, use it for a sandwich, and just throw it away. So if you have the plastic, make as much use of it as you can. Just don't throw it right into a landfill if you can avoid it. And same with clothing is that, that fast fashion thing is so awful, but yet as you said, if you can pass it along to people and it gets used and used and used until it falls apart, at least there's something about that.
Right. And like I would say that nobody today can be perfect. Like there's still plastic in my life that I strive to eliminate, but it is everywhere and it really underscores again the system's need. And I'm not saying pass off our plastic stuff on people in more need than we are, but like we have to make sacrifices. Like for a long time, I relied on like, a food bank, for example, and most of that food is wrapped in plastic. I have a lot of friends who, like during the pandemic, that was where we got extra nourishment because that's what we needed to do. Um, and you know, it's not great for our health, but like making that sacrifice, sometimes we need to make it. So there's no shaming in this plastic-free journey. It's a work in progress, like we said.
We're all
Um,
doing our
do
best.
what we can, yes.
Yeah. So Laura asks, what about cutting up plastic to use for inside mattresses, cushions, pillows, etc., and covering them with natural products? So like if you already have the plastic, can you reuse it in that way?
You totally can. I mean, again, it comes with your level of comfort with this. Like I would say that for the long term, I would be probably saying like, avoid it if you can, like as a permanent thing in your house. But if this is like something that you need to use or like want to, make use of something and you feel comfortable with it, that's better than, excuse me, getting hiccups now. It's better than being directly exposed to the plastic.
Mhm.
It's less likely to, get in touch with your skin. It's less likely to actually, get into the air in your house. Um, and with washing it, if you could take the cover off, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think so. Jeannie asks, is the plastic problem the worst in the US as compared to other countries? And is there a country that is a model for working on this problem?
Great question. We are actually, we'll say we, so I'm in the US, but the US is the worst plastic polluting country in the world because we are the biggest subsidizer of fossil fuels and plastics, and also the biggest plastic producer in terms of the corporations here are pumping out more than any other nation. You're also like the number one consumerist country, as we know. And a lot of that actually is linked to plastic. There's a big history there. But when I lived for a short time, several years in Denmark, and being in Scandinavia, part of the EU, there was a legislation passed called the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive. And this directive mandated that, single-use plastics be eliminated through a lot of these different practices that incorporate reuse, refill, repair, and share, as we talked about, but also other materials. And so seeing that be implemented, it's different in every EU country. However, there was a lot of progress being made, in my opinion, after that directive. And it's not perfect, but it is a lot easier to find something, say, like in a reusable container over there than some parts of the US. Although I'll say that there's progress being made by businesses and cities. Some municipalities have really tried to eliminate waste in the US. So kudos to those. But it is by far, we are quite a wasteful place to be.
I'm really loving Laura's questions. What about cutting up polyester fabrics and using them inside quilts instead of the traditional batting?
That's a really cool idea. Yeah, I mean, if you can put the exterior as something that's, plastic free, that's better. The, you know, there are sometimes off-gassing from certain plastics. Polyester, if it's like brand new, can sometimes be very like chemical laden. I actually received as a gift a baby, like a tummy time, like a belly crawling mat. That's what they call it these days. And it had polyester fill and a cotton exterior. And I thought, oh, okay, like I'll give it a try. That's good compromise. And it smelled so much of chemicals that I actually just threw in the garbage because I said nobody should have this because like I don't want like a baby, like I think of my baby and I'm like I don't want anyone's baby having their face next to this thing. So I guess if you use your judgment on whether or not the fumes from the plastic too, like if you're using something like a blanket or something that'll be close to your body, I would be just wary of that.
Mhm. I mean, I think to go along the same lines, and we're almost out of time, but I wanted to mention that like there's certain places maybe that you can put those things like a shed, using it for what is that stuff that keeps it from getting cold? Insulation, like those kind of things. But you're saying is that like some of these plastics are just so toxic to us that we really shouldn't have them near our bodies.
Yeah, I mean, like in an ideal world, we wouldn't. But like I'm in a realistic world with all of you people. So like, we're here together. Like we're not in the fake world. We have to like envision that perfect world in our minds and then like we're all here working on the solution. So I love the idea and I think it's really smart, but we have to be careful about like, yeah, choosing the use wisely, basically. And yeah, like having it in our homes or on our bodies, like there are different uses that could like you know be less suitable for reuse, I'll say. Like eating out of plastic, you should avoid that first and foremost, and wearing it directly on your body, sleeping like directly on plastic or having it in your pillow. But these other uses I think are better than those.
Yeah, because Laura continues with the quilter should wash all their fabrics before sewing, but if you have like a plastic interior, then it still might not be great for you to like sleep, like have it as a blanket. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, more of if it was like a plastic on the exterior. I think that like again, like make your trade-offs. Like my mattress for my bed, it definitely has like polyurethane foam in it. That's not great, but I have a cotton pad over it. So like, I'm making that choice for myself. So like it is what you feel comfortable with really. And just like eliminate where you can. And I think a lot of these like DIY hacks, that's a great use of like free material. As an artist, when I use microplastic, like it's a free, widely available material. Like I'm using it. It's not great for me to touch. I'll sometimes be like, maybe I should be like, I wash my hands very thoroughly afterwards when I do it. But I think like, should I really be touching this? Um, this is trade-offs we make. So we try and figure out where we're comfortable and do these things.
If you have an extra minute, I'd like to ask just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Are flannels good materials? That's like
I
cotton.
I have a lot of cotton flannels. I know that some might have fleece inside, so I would avoid those. Fleeces in particular sheds a lot of microplastic. So yeah, if you can avoid that, but cotton, that's totally fine.
Okay. And Jules asked, clothes keep shedding, especially in washing. Is there any system around like a municipality that is piloting a filter?
Great question. I know in France there was like a mandate to put filters on all washing machines. And in the US, there are companies that created either like a ball that goes in your washing machine or a filter that does extend and collect the plastics. But the question is like, then what do you do with the plastic fibers? Because then you throw them in the garbage and then they go into the environment. So it's like, oh no, going in circles. So it is good to use, I would say, if you can, preventing it from going directly in your water. But until that time comes where like we find a place to actually put these plastic fibers, it's like it's not hard to call that a solution in my mind, but that's why again, like avoiding the synthetic, washing your synthetic materials is probably a better idea. But yeah, but there has been action in that area.
Last question. Do you know of any bills in progress in Congress to address any ma of the macro issues?
Totally. So the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, and if I can get our petition from our website up really quickly, I'll do that. That is a really nice comprehensive piece of legislation that's been reintroduced several times over the past few years. And it's really nice because it does look at plastic from the sense of it's like it starts as a fossil fuel and then we create plastic and we need to address all of these different areas and actually hold the corporations that make the plastic accountable, which is look at us running around trying to be plastic free and it's like a stressful thing, but in reality, who's making all that plastic mess for us? It's not us making the plastic, it's the corporations that are making it. So that one is a great piece of legislation in the US. And then we also have, I'm trying to find the link, so apologize for my little blank stare here. But the plastics treaty. So right now, the plastics treaty was supposed to be finalized by the United Nations member states by this year. And unfortunately, the member states could not agree. And a lot of the states were very pro plastic, pro fossil fuels. But unfortunately, the voices of industry really swayed. Sorry, no, most of the countries wanted to have a strong treaty on plastics, but the few plastic and fossil fuel friendly countries were swayed by industry. And so there was disagreement. So it was not finalized. So I'm putting a petition there. So you can tell the US government to be serious about this issue because the negotiations will continue this year. And so such legislation would hopefully require, on a global level, action be taken in every single country to address plastic pollution. Again, from that like holistic point of view that we need, because as I point out, it's not just the plastic itself, but it's like, the production, the use, the shipping, the fossil fuels, the disposal. It's this whole swath of activity and infrastructure that's really problematic. So the more we can look at it globally, the better. But the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act would be a big deal in the US specifically. So we can keep pushing those.
We will. Erica, thank you once again for this amazing conversation that makes me feel like going out there and like rabble rousing.
Yay.
And for everybody here with your awesome questions and ideas, really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll look into some of those petitions and get, do the activist work that we need to do on the local level so that it affects the global level eventually. Erica, congratulations on the baby, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Such a pleasure. And thank you for having me. And thank you for all your awesome questions. Be well, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody. Take care.